Welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast. This is John Cottrell. I'm Jerry Buie, and we want to welcome you to another episode. We've been bantering about what to talk about, and we decided to consult the Oracle. Chat. And ChatGPT said it's time to talk about radical self-acceptance.
Ooh, okay.
Healing shame and reclaiming power as gay men.
Yes. I think that's a really good topic because I think we can really tie in maybe just some things that we've talked about before, but kind of wrap it up in a nice package because I like that term of radical self-acceptance.
Yeah. So what does radical mean?
Oh.
When we say radical, like...
The first thing that comes to mind is just like not standard or out of the ordinary, unique, stands out, prolific, just something that's broad and big and bold.
Yeah. Big, bold. For some reason, when I think of radical, I think like here's the box of acceptable, and radical is like way over there. Like think about AI.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
AI 20 years ago was a radical idea.
Right. Yeah.
And when you hear these ideas, you think, is that even possible?
Mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then here we are achieving, talking, chat, help us.
Yeah, it's so out of the box. And when it's not just, kind of a step away from out of the box, it's clear down a path that we haven't explored yet.
Yeah.
Think about radical.
And I had some friends once that were interviewed on the local news. This was probably about adopting kids or something. It was a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this cringe moment with them because I love them to death, but I was just like, really? I can't believe that came out of your mouth. Because they were trying to justify their capacity to adopt a child. And what they said is, I'm just like you, except for who I sleep with.
Oh.
Right? That is not radical.
That's not, no.
And I went back to them. I said, yeah, I'm not even sure. Like, that's disturbing to me. Like, what it says is we're trying to get as close to a heterosexist norm as that is acceptable.
Yeah.
So if you think historically, like to be gay and single, you're kind of invisible. But if you're gay and in a relationship, that's more worthy. That's more preferable. We'll highlight the gay couples because they're kind of living close to a heterosexist model, right? And I think in that process of radical self-acceptance is this opportunity to dare to live as authentically and as organically as your spirit desires.
Yeah. And what makes it, I want to say radical. What makes it radical too is that when someone can do that, when they can just really step in 100% into that authenticity and live in that way within the context of kind of this normative societal, means and things, and that's what I think what makes it kind of radical is that person, that individual is kind of, floating around doing their thing. And everything that they do, maybe say, think, is so different from what's going on around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had Charles on the show,
and
Charles is 90 and full of life and vigor, and he's been one of my teachers and mentors and grandfather, if you will. And we went out to dinner with some friends, kind of a goodbye dinner, and Charles, who is 90, who's done a lot of internal work. I've had lots of conversations with him. He is not bashful about talking about death,
right?
Having a deliberate death.
Yeah.
And when he says deliberate, it doesn't mean he's like advocating from like self-suicide. What he's saying is to kind of will himself out of existence. And so at dinner last night, he was like, Well, I'm trying to figure out what grabs my attention anymore. And if there's nothing out there that I can be passionate about, I'm just ready to step out.
Step out and
Yeah.
go to the next level of being, right?
Well, our friends who are at the dinner table, like Bruce and I, who have these conversations with Charles all the time, we're just eating and like, oh, there goes Charles again talking about death and dying.
Yeah.
But our friends are literally like
What?
staring at each other, like he dared to have this conversation,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, it's like, yeah, for folks that may not be as tuned into um, the kind of processes that Bruce, Charles, and I tap into frequently,
Mhm.
like the active conversation around death and dying can be it's radical because it's not a norm. We have not normalized the ability to celebrate and to honor the pathway of death.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
And uh, and so my friends, that was, in fact, they even texted me this morning saying, I'm so worried about Charles.
Is he okay?
Like,
he's more than okay.
Yeah, he's probably better than most of us, right?
Right.
Like he's very clear about that.
Very clear, because it's a really, I would think, a healthy perspective on death and dying and what to expect and how it might work. Because he even talked about having a plan, right? As far as how he kind of sees it and wants it to be, and
Yep.
he's ready. Not in the sense, like you said, it's not in the sense that he's ready to off himself or something like that. It's just that when the time has come, he's ready.
Yeah.
And he has a plan.
Yeah. But when we talk about this concept of radical, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
like we just did that podcast at the conference, and one of the things I wanted to accomplish, I'm not sure we quite did, but I thought how interesting it would be for straight people to hear our conversations about our queerness and our how we exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we kind of accomplished that because you and I are just talking, and then we broadcast it, and then we get people going, "What the hell?" No, right? I think sometimes how we see and view and engage our lives, like for instance, gay men tend to be very liberal around our sexuality and sensuality and sexual expressions. And we see it as a very normative way of existing. And yet none of us tell our mothers about it.
Right.
Right. Because, and yet there's nothing to be ashamed of. Right. And yet, for those to listen in,
Mm-hmm.
would think of it as very radical, as being very extreme, being
Yeah.
very like, oh my God, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like, in fact, when we were talking in that conversation, I was going to bring up, I think one of the gifts that gay men have is this attunement to our sexuality and our sexual expression and how we experiment with it and play with it. I don't see the counterpart of that in our heterosexual community. I don't see them as liberated in the conversation about it.
In the conversation about it, I agree.
So radical could be, and yesterday I did a presentation about different, so when I go to the reindeer people and see how they live and how they exist, for them, that's a very standard way of existing. But I look at it and think, to me, that feels very radical to be living off the grid. And yet at one point it was a norm.
Right.
So radical self-acceptance, like, what does that look like? Here I'm a therapist. I'm like, what does that look like for it?
Here's what comes to mind, as you know, when the topic popped up, and what popped into my head was, and it's something that I do in teaching tantra classes, because tantra is energy work, and it's about really kind of charging ourselves up and feeling a certain way so we can achieve certain things. But in that energy, there's this vibration and this movement, this almost like the cellular shifts that's happening within us, right? That allows us to do very powerful things. And in that process of doing tantra work, whether it's, you know, breathing, you know, very dramatically, there's dramatic breath exercises, yoga, and there's a lot of things. But what we're stepping into is, I think, the ability to have a greater awareness of what and who you are. Because we can certainly see ourselves as, you know, I'm a physical being, I'm an analytical being, I'm an emotional being. And I think, you know, that's kind of standard for just any human being, right? But in a way, to me, that's kind of two-dimensional. Like that's just, you know, that's basic, as the kids would say. That's basic. But what else are we? By doing some kind of work and introspection, we also find that we are, you know, we are spiritual beings, and we are. I even would say to my students, we are godly beings. We are extraterrestrial beings. We are a lot
Mhm.
in this
Thing.
thing, this uh, sack of skin, right? And beyond. And we're even beyond this. And if we can come to a point of understanding that we're just more than this, then I think that's a step towards radical self-acceptance.
Mm.
I'm a spiritual being. I'm a magical being. I'm an extraterrestrial being. If you really think about it, we are. um, and to live that way and to speak that way amongst the muggles and the norm, you know, it might be seen as quite radical. But I think for us, that is our authenticity. That is, we are radical beings.
Right. Um, have you seen the movie Lucy
I
with
know of it.
Scarlett Johansson
Yeah, yeah,
and Morgan Freeman?
right. Oh,
Eh,
wait, did I see it? I know of it, but I don't think I saw it.
Well, the premise of the movie is so Lucy is this girl who unwittingly gets drawn into being like a drug mule, and she's carrying this new drug
Right.
that she kind of gets kidnapped. They put the drugs inside her body,
Yes.
and now she's got to like follow the instructions. Well, somehow the drug releases itself into her system, and what it does is it expands her brain capacity.
Mm.
And then kind of the other subplot, then they end up merging, is Morgan Freeman is a brain scientist.
Hmm.
And so he's giving this lecture talking about how humans tend to use 10% of their brain,
Right, right.
right?
Hmm.
And so he starts hypothesizing about what it would look like if humans used, like dolphins use 20% of their brain, right? They use more of their brain capacity than humans do.
Wow.
But he starts hypothesizing what 20, 30, 40, et cetera, percent of brain capacity would look like.
Mm.
Well, in the meanwhile, Scarlett Johansson is having it happen.
She's having it happen. Wow.
And it's a really interesting movie. It's kind of artistically done in an unusual way. But the premise of it, at one point, as she's going through this transformation, she's talking to her mother and she goes, I feel every emotion. I feel the air. I feel gravity.
Mm.
Like, and what she was saying is, like, my consciousness is expanding,
Hmm.
but it's not like she is naming things that are extraordinary. She's naming, the vibrations of that butterfly
Yes.
and the air on my skin and how gravity is holding me down.
Hmm.
And that's as far as I'll get into the movie. But what we're learning through some research about neuroplasticity, right? And what we're learning through a lot of psychedelic studies, for instance, around neuroplasticity. I mean, part of the scientific version of psychedelia is that we're rewiring the brain,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And I just thought, wow, what would I look like as a gay man if I were using more of my brain capacity? Like, what would it be like to feel and experience my gayness in its totality as opposed to a rigid container that I've given it.
Mm-hmm.
Am I making sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm feeling this.
yeah. And I think a lot of people, when we talk about gayness, people immediately defer to sex.
Yeah, that the physical act of sex.
Right. And what I would argue is I think that's part of social conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like my friend said on the TV show, the only thing that makes me different from straight people is who I'm having sex with. My argument is that's probably the only thing we have in similar.
Yeah.
Right? There's only so many things you can do with the body. No. But part of the conditioning and part of the pathology and how sexual orientation has historically been defined has been around behavioral actions.
Yes.
Like the Mormon Church is obsessed about laws of chastity, about the mechanics of how one uses their body. It is very difficult for them to conceptualize that sexual orientation is a much broader experience. But consequently, because we've been socialized under these constructs, a lot of people just get stuck on, well, I'm attracted to guys. I want to fuck guys.
And they just get caught in that loop.
Yeah.
And if we get caught in that loop, it just emphasizes that stereotype, really, and minimizes and objectifies even,
Yeah.
but minimizes who we really are.
Right.
And if we're doing, and if that's coming from the outside, that's one thing, but we're also doing it to ourselves, right?
And then consequently, I look at you as an object. I look at everyone as an object,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're desirable or not,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're sexy enough,
Yeah.
young enough,
Yeah.
right? We get caught up in that very surface construct.
Yes.
That I think there's value in that. There's chemistry in that. But think about what happened at the conference when we proposed the question, what are the blessings and gifts of being gay? Right? Now, we've had that conversation and we've had that on the podcast. But when I asked that question of my clients and even the audience, right, there was this pause.
It was a pause. It's like, oh.
Yeah, like everyone's brain kind of went, wait, blessing? We just thought it was a necessary evil kind of a thing, right? I think that's a powerful way of recalibrating.
Yes, that's a good word.
The sense of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And another exercise I've used with people is to get them to look at how does gayness impact your sociability? How does gayness impact your emotional body?
Yes.
How does it impact your physical sense of identity? How does it impact your connectedness to purpose and meaning or spirituality?
Absolutely. That's it.
There's one category I'm missing. Did I say mental? Yeah. What are the like? How do I think about it? How do I process it?
Yes.
Because I honestly believe whether you're in the closet or not, right? There's that lens of, I've talked to a lot of guys who are married, have kids, afraid they're going to destroy their family. And I say, let's just understand that the lens and how you've parented, maybe you've parented the way you have because of the gift of your gayness.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? And at least your kids grew up in a nicely decorated house. But see, so to me, radical acceptance is, are we willing to let go of a rigid, narrow construct around sexuality?
Yes.
And can we bring that in balance with these other components of our life?
Mm-hmm. And I love the word you use. It's a recalibration.
Yeah.
Can we recalibrate from that place of this standardized way that we've been socialized into and certainly have accepted it in some regards, and radically shift that, to take the time, because there's an effort involved.
Yeah.
To recalibrate, to notice what box I am stuck in, and finding pathways out of that box, and it's through those channels. I think it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and beyond those too. It's those doors that we need to kind of knock on and take a peek at. Like, how do I think about these things?
Yeah.
How do I see myself as a physical being? Because if it's all in the context of, I have sex with guys,
Yeah.
then we have a long way to go because we're not just that.
Do you know, in a lot of the indigenous societies that I've engaged with, where, right, the construct around what we call queerness is through that lens of, right, these people bring something to the tribe, right? Those are not the constructs that we grow up with. We grow up cautious about who knows, because it's something to be afraid of. But this kind of goes into a kind of a deeper conversation. But in many cases in those cultures where the queerness is kind of seen as a spiritual gift, so is the sexuality. Right? And so it's like having sex with someone who walked in the two-spirited way, for some warriors, gave them an advantage over their enemy.
Yes, it was something quite powerful.
Right. A lot of sacred items were anointed by the fluids that come from sexual play. But it had to come from the two-spirited people. So even the construct of our sexuality was seen as a powerful gift, as a powerful tool to connect to the Creator.
Exactly.
Right.
Wow.
And kind of the more contemporary concepts around that, right, is discussions around sex magic. And even I think a lot of the tantric principles are about harnessing and connecting to the energy. Which in all cases, to me, sounds like a very deliberate celebratory engagement of working with that energy. And
absolutely.
I was just thinking, if I ever need to go, I should go to a sex party and charge up all my sacred things. No.
Well, yeah. Make it a ceremony.
Make it a
celebratory experience, not just a hookup, but it's something that, I'm going to enrich my being, my soul, my mind, my body.
And there's more to that, right? It's not just like the engagement, but I guess you could do that. But I think if you have two or more people who are connected in a very deliberate, intentional process, what evolves can be very powerful and beautiful. Like, I've participated in some of your Body Central workshops, and I see people who kind of show up really kind of inhibited, unsure, fearful. And at some point you see people kind of release. And I remember one time at the old house where we had a good group of guys there, maybe 12. So we had 3 different tables. But the energy had gotten so built up that we gathered as a circle, all of us naked with our arms around each other. And we just held in our hearts the beauty of what had happened. And then we just energetically and collectively sent it out into our community. Right. And it was a really powerful, beautiful process of intent. And part of getting there was working through the challenges of our stories and constructs about our bodies, about our sexual worthiness. I'm done preaching now.
Preach on. I mean, because that's it. I just recently had I call it a tantric circle, and where we come together, we talk about these concepts and what happens and what you can potentially expect as we do this. And I remember someone made a comment about, it's like, he says, I like doing these circles because I feel like I'm in a group of people who are radically different from others, and that we hold something quite special. I said, yes, you do. And I said, and because you get to kind of reinforce that while you're here in this circle, we have this, just the numbers in this community, in this tribe, we're just, like when you take your crystals out and let the full moon charge it, that's what we're doing. We're just charging it up. And I said, and I think we have a responsibility to the world outside of this circle. We have a responsibility to take this power and magic and walk it into the world. Not just keep it here and practice and play with it here, but to live it and walk it and speak it. Not that you have to go talk about your tantric experience. No, it's just how you show up. It's just, you're going to show up with brighter eyes, shoulders rolled back, a sense of confidence, a sense of well-being. And if you show up that way, it's a ripple effect with, the rest of the world. And also I think it's a responsibility that you're also providing for, I think our baby gays. This is how you can show up. This is how you can be in the world.
Well, we were kicking around a potential topic that we saw on Facebook, and there was a question posed on Facebook about how would you describe the gays in Salt Lake City, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, well, that's kind of hard to take on. But what happens is this interesting, as I was reading the feed and what people were responding to, it was a pretty shallow, right? Oh, there's these cliques. Oh, there's an in-group and an out-group. Nobody ever gets into the in-group. You're only popular if you have a good body. Like it was really interesting to me that, and what I just kind of heard you say about the person who said, I feel like we're outside the norm. And I think there's something that dismays me a little bit about that, because it still kind of has this like in and out kind of mentality versus, what am I trying to say? We're unique because we see this differently, but I'm not sure I would invite anyone else to join.
I see.
Right? Like somewhere I'm not sure of that dynamic. And I think what I was dismayed about the conversation on Facebook and what I hear from folks frequently, like people will look at Person I and say, oh, your life is so different. It's like, not really, because I think it's about, once I really know myself or have an experience or see myself in a particular way, why wouldn't I want to include others? If I'm assuming they don't want it, then that layer of self-acceptance is not terribly radical, right? It's exceptional. It's right?
Yeah.
And what I really want to believe, and I see it frequently in the people I spend time with, that people may not show up connected to it or even conscious of the idea that these conversations are crucial around who we are. But once they get exposed to it, they get open to it, right?
Yes.
And so then the question is not so much about what's the community that's showing up for me, because wherever my layer of self-acceptance is, that's what I would draw to me.
Yeah.
Miguel Ruiz, this is my paraphrasing, basically said that people, places, and circumstances show up as secondary characters to my own primary story.
Yes.
So if my story is we're shallow, why is that showing up? If I think this is just the exception, that we're just unique in this moment, what does that say about my primary story? And what I believe is we all have the capacity to be powerful, magical. We are shapeshifters. We are innovators. I've been telling my clients lately, under the political duress, is like, don't be dismayed. Like, our community will not only rise up, but the GOP will be so embarrassed
Oh my gosh.
that, it's what happened with the Reagan
Yeah.
administration.
Oh yeah.
They had to finally cave.
Cave.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, and it was because of our magic
Yeah.
and our tenacity. We still have it.
It's still there. Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think where I'm pausing and hesitating is, how do we get to that place of radical self-acceptance? Like there's like 3 concepts in those: radical self-acceptance. So I think we've described it. The question is, how do we access it?
Access it. It's the idea. I think one has to just have to first realize that there is something more than what I am, and to begin to question and ponder and wonder. Because I think if we just if we're not questioning, then we're just kind of doing the norm, just kind of staying in that loop, whatever process and box that might be, and just kind of walking around that that box and staying on that hamster wheel. But something has to spark an interest in, is there more than this? There has to be a question of some sort. So I think it starts there, and begin to wonder and ponder, is there more than this? And where it begins, it might be different for different people, because we touched on, your physicality, your body, maybe you start there. It's, can I accept who I am in this physical body, in however form it shows up, and whatever that is at that moment?
I'm having a radical thought.
Okay. Share.
Cher is the singer? No.
Yeah.
If I could. No. Think about how we identify ourselves. A bear is what?
Usually a
big and hairy.
Big, hairy, yeah.
A twink is?
Young, skinny.
An otter is?
Hairy, usually a little thinner.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've created all these interesting labels.
Yeah.
Top, bottom.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Everything is around this. So what if we redefined ourselves? What if we adopted language and terminology that indicated the kind of magic of queerness we carry?
Say that again.
Yeah. So instead of being a bear or a twink or a daddy or whatever,
you're right.
What if the labels were based on the gift that you bring?
Oh, I see.
Like, we have our magicians. We have our shapeshifters.
Yeah.
We have our empaths. We have our activators. What if our profiles on Grindr were less about bears, twinks, mask, femme, top, bottom, and more about, I identify as a magician. I identify as a wizard. I identify as a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
I am a profound empath.
Yeah.
I am a very open-hearted individual.
Yeah. That sounds like taking the gay blessings and gifts, and that's
giving it language.
Giving it a language. Yeah. That's how you.
I have a friend who is a beautiful man physically and is smart and blah, blah, blah. And everyone sees the physicality piece of it. But what I know about him is he's a profoundly tender-hearted man.
Yes.
And most people don't know this about him. But it's like, to know him is to access that place of tenderness.
Yes.
And what if we even described like the sexual encounter I hope to have is one with lots of touch and caress.
Yeah.
And you don't see things like cuddling or caressing. Like, it's like, I'm a power top.
Yeah.
I'm a power bottom.
Right. Yeah. yeah, and
What
not
they're really saying is control freak.
and not seeing, or would you tend to describe someone as, you know, sensual and intimate? There's just, there's a sensuality about this person
Yeah.
that comes out when I'm with them, or this intimacy. I just feel very well connected to that individual.
Yeah. So why not? Why wouldn't
Mm.
that be an interesting way of redefining the physicality piece?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can do that for yourself, even to take away those particular labels and start to describe yourself perhaps in forms of the gifts that you have, because I think if that gets amplified and recognized, that's going to show more than just the physical body, and
Yeah.
people are going to see that. I work with someone um, who I would describe as highly intuitive. It's like, you're just so intuitive, and and that's your magic.
Yeah.
Ride that, use that. And I also see him as, I say, and you're a light. People are attracted to you, and it's not, and it's beyond your physical being. People are drawn to a light, this inner light within you. Um, and but he's got to recognize that that he has that light and he shines that light. But that's how I see him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, I think if you can get beyond the physical, because that's what we do. It's like, well, who is he? Well, he's this tall, skinny, guy, or a larger, muscular guy. We start there. We start with the physical things.
Yeah.
But what if you did start with, oh, he's just so um, intuitive, or he's just so has this magic about, being able to, bring people together, or
But what if we were describing? See, the radical self-acceptance piece in my mind is not how I see you.
mm,
How do you see you?
yes.
So, like, if you were writing your profile,
Mm-hmm.
what would you want people to know?
I would. That's good. That's a good, because it's self-acceptance, not how other
Without
people.
the pictures.
Yeah. um, Multifaceted.
Yes. Eclectic.
Yeah, eclectic, multifaceted. Um, I see myself as the almost like a detective. I want to figure things out. I'm a seeker of knowledge. I'm a seeker of information and how things are put together. Um, that's how I see myself.
I see it.
Yeah, yeah. How about you? How would you? What would be some of the words that you would
I'm a
use?
daddy.
Because I think this would be a good exercise for people to do.
I am a fairly passionate person. If I tap into an idea, or even if I'm naked and being with someone, I am passionate in the moment with, and I love sensuality. I love touch. I love massage. I love explorative kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I love to feel safe when I'm in those environments. Like when I say safe, not necessarily physically safe. I mean, that's important, but I want to know that I can be explorative with someone. And in order to do that, I have to feel confident in their presence.
Yeah.
And whether that's a deep spiritual process or a sexual process, like those are components of me that I value, that I think that I bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and I think I enjoy provocative conversations and engagements,
Mm-hmm.
right? So um, if I'm engaged in a political conversation, a social justice piece, or a spirituality component, like I love the richness of mature voices engaged and something that's provocative. I love coming out of something going, well, I didn't know that about myself or about the situation or about the potentiality of something. And I would say that crosses the physical, sexual. I think that crosses the emotional. I think that crosses the spiritual.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I think that would be a really important exercise for people to do, to you know, shift that diagram basically of how you want to be seen, but how do you see yourself? What are those radical pieces that you see in yourself? It's really just being able to articulate those gay blessings, those blessings and gifts that you have, and being able to speak on those terms.
That's going to go in my book chapter.
Oh, there you go. Right. Yeah. Oh, yes. I have nothing more to say.
And we're done. John is done.
I just think it's just so fascinating. But what would be, but I'm also thinking, what would be, the hang up, or what would be the obstacle? What would not allow someone to do that? Not allow.
My fear and defensiveness.
Exactly.
I love asking clients this question, right? When they're kind of stuck. I'm like, what is it that you want? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's keeping you from there? Fear. Really? What are you afraid of? Right? We live in a culture that's fairly indoctrinated and emboldened around the concept of fear. Fear somehow becomes the justification and the excuse to stop. Right? I don't jump out of an airplane because of fear.
It's scary.
Even if there's a parachute, right? And yet, that could be a very liberating experience to cross that threshold and to perhaps experience something that was unexpected. And I think, okay, I'm going to try to riff on this for a minute because, well, I'm going to use the platform of trauma, which could trigger some folks, but I think it's a radical thought. Something bad happens to me. I develop a life schema or attitude about it.
Right.
My beliefs and my stories support the story of victim, the story of the trauma. And then consequently, the longer I hold on to that without examining it and facing the fear associated with it, what happens is I begin to build an identity around it.
Right.
The essence of who I am is the story of victim and trauma. And so when we're asking someone to work through trauma to get on the other side of it, we're asking them to rebirth a new story, to have confidence in a new experience. And so it's interesting how many people, and to me, I equate it to addiction. Well, I know that what I'm doing is not working, but I hold on to it because the existential crisis is I don't know who I am on the other side of it.
Right.
And my assumption is probably the thing that holds me back. Maybe I think I deserved it, or maybe there's some part of me that I deem as unworthy because I built that identity around this thing that happened to me. Right. And so, I had someone ask me at the conference actually the other day, like, how do you get there? And I said, for me, when I immediately go, I'm not sure about that, that's usually the invitation to do it. Right? Because when I start to break down the construct of why I don't think I should do it, I realize that it's rooted in all these stories about if I can do it. What would people think? Right? They asked me to do this presentation on shamanic journeying at this mental health conference. And it was like coming out of the closet because they don't know me in that capacity. So now I'm standing there barefoot in my rattle and my feathers. And they're like, who are you?
Who's this guy? Yeah.
Yeah. So like the willingness to be seen outside of a particular way,
Yeah.
right? All those are components, right, that have to be challenged. And so when I find myself, I don't know about that, that's usually, that has now become my trigger to not if I should do it, but how am I going to do it?
How am I going to do it?
Yeah. And sometimes it's an amazing experience. It's a beautiful experience. And sometimes it's not, but nothing's lost.
Nothing's lost, and you gave it a try. And it's not, and it means, and it also can tell you that that's not the only way to figure this out.
Yeah.
There's other ways and approaches to create that new story, to break out of that box. I love that example, especially with trauma and being able, and we build identity around that. We build all these mechanisms to stay within that bubble, right? And that's how we live our lives. And when we were faced with what would happen if that bubble burst, there is that fear of like, well, I don't know anything else. This is all I know. This is my world. This is my bubble. And I don't know how I would function and be outside of that. and that can be hopefully an invitation to, well, what would happen if you poked a hole in it and start to look at the other side. I like to use examples of other situations, maybe kind of a little bit, let's just say, less than that trauma that they experienced, but something hard or difficult that they went through. I can even think of coming out is a big process, right? And those that get to the other side of it, can say it was very liberating, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe they're maybe faced with something else that's traumatic in their life or hardship in their life. I like to remind them of, remember when you got through that hardship? How was that? How did you do that? Can you reclaim or relive or redo some of those pieces that got you to the other side of that in this current circumstance? And I'm wondering if that could be a strategy for people when they're trying to, move through or move into a radical self-acceptance that, well, this is all I know. Well, are there examples elsewhere in your life that will give you the prompts and traits and things that will help you get to the next moment?
Here's an example of where I think fear hits us communally. And as you were talking, this was coming to mind. Here in Salt Lake City, there's a group that gets together, I think monthly, maybe more frequently. It's a sex group. And it's been around for a long time, at least 10 years. Yeah. And they will host big parties frequently, and they'll get 50 to 60 guys show up. Yeah. And so it's very physical, it's very sexual, it's very, right? And if you think about even our gay sexual repertoire, right? I don't know if the lesbians have the equivalent of grinder, scruff, sniffles, right? All these other, right? I don't, but gay men do.
We know what we got.
Yeah. And so that's all fine and good. And I believe this group has a very legitimate place in the community. It gets applauded. They get awards. Yeah, right. Exactly. They have a float at the Pride Day. Right. And I appreciate what they bring. But then when I contrast it with what we try to create with Mindfully Gay, the most frequent excuse I hear about not showing up is I would feel vulnerable. And I laugh because
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know that how does going to a sex party, walking around with your dick hanging out and your ass in chaps, how does that not leave you feeling vulnerable?
Right.
But coming and talking in a circle and daring to explore the places of spirit and emotion and identity, how does that become vulnerable?
Mm,
How does that become scary?
yeah.
And not hanging from a cross and getting your ass whipped. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I absolutely do.
And somehow this
That's good.
gets right in the pride events, right? All the clubs will have go-go boys dancing on them in their Speedos, right? They're promoting this kind of physicality piece. I love those floats. I know a lot of guys in those floats. Yeah, they're pretty, they're sexy, they're hot. Like, there's $1, right? Um, I guess my observation is the place of radical self-acceptance as a community would be our capacity to celebrate the sensual and the sexual, kind of going back to our Reclaiming Pride episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when we celebrate the spirit, the tenacity, the essence, the fortitude, the strength, the going forwardness?
Yeah.
What if we celebrated our elders for showing up? What if we celebrated, the young people as they're coming out, right? What would happen if that physicality piece was also in balance with these other pieces? I think we would be such a different force to reckon with.
I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just thinking about, just that dichotomy of, here's the Speedo guys, the leather guys, dicks out, butts out, that kind of thing. And, how is that not vulnerable yet? Talking about your feelings and emotions, is,
Yeah.
right? And I think going back to that scenario, it's what's expected. I think it's what's expected of our community. We expect that sexualized, display.
So to be radical would be to perhaps challenge our own communal norms.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be radical would be to wear turtleneck to Pride.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, long sleeve shirts,
Burkas,
pants, and burkas,
with a little rainbow sticker.
Right? Yeah, that would be radical. I think that would be radical. Because I think when we see the floats with the go-go boys and the bumping music and the club music and all of that, that's expected. That's what we expect to see. And I think, those who are not in this community, that's also what they expect to see. Oh, that's what those gays do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to have spiritual ceremony in circle with pipe, with conversation, with sensual touch or something like that, that I think would be perceived as radical and not expected.
Well, frankly, we've heard some of the rumors.
Mm.
Oh, isn't it interesting?
Mm.
This sex group we love, but Mindful Gay, they're having sex in the desert, which we don't do. But the rumor is we're just a sex club.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're mindful about it.
That's all. we bring more to the party.
Yeah, it's like, but isn't that interesting?
It is interesting
that there's that judgment that gets pushed upon what we could potentially be up, because they don't know. We assume, right?
Right.
But isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
Yeah,
it is interesting.
Maybe we need to change the cover of our podcast. We're harnesses.
Okay.
I want the pink one. Gotta be radical.
Gotta be radical. But that radical self-acceptance, maybe it's, part of it is, seeing what is out there and what seems to be accepted and expected in our community, and doing something that's just completely different. But it's you. It's authentically you. Because that's what this is all about, really. It's tapping into what makes you you. Is it your sensuality? Is it your intelligence? Is it your intuition? Is it your magic? What is it about you that you want to put on display?
Well, and we've even tried to figure out how to make mindfully gay sexy.
Yeah, so we've fallen into the trap, I think, of, if I'm hearing you right, I think we fall into the trap of why don't people see us or accept us? Do we need to put, do we need to be topless on our pictures? Do we need to be shaking our bums in in thongs or something to get people? He's thinking. To
I
get
have
people's
that one little sequenced piece.
to get people's attentions, like, why, we keep asking the question, why don't people see us?
Yeah,
um and but I think we've continued to resort not to do those things.
yeah.
you know
I believe people love our idea. Like, I run the Instagram page. I'm not the best at it, right? But when people make comments, or I'll have people message me privately,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, I love this concept. I love what you're doing. Um, I just don't know if I would fit in.
Mm.
I don't know that there would be a place for me.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not as attractive or sexy or whatever. And it's interesting the qualifiers that
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
use to exclude themselves.
Mhm.
And the reframe I want to use is, hun, face that fear.
Mhm.
Because what I have seen, and remember that one time when we did Queer Spirit many years ago, and this guy kept signing up for the retreat and then wouldn't show up. And then finally, after 3 attempts, he showed up.
Yeah.
And in the talking, and it just so happened in that circle, we did have some guys who were very beautiful, nice, muscular kinds of bodies. And he happened to be kind of very much a bearish kind of a guy.
Mhm.
But he told the story about how the other times he had come to the retreat, that he got to the retreat ground,
Mhm.
parked his car,
Yep.
and was too afraid to come
Oh.
and join us.
Mhm. Yep.
And then when he finally did come and join us and participated in the circles, he goes, one thing I've learned in this circle is you guys are as fucked up as I am.
Right?
But what he was saying is, my story was because you look away or show up away, that you must be absent of the challenges that I have.
Right. Right.
And what he learned in that circle is that it didn't matter the wrapping of the individual,
That's it.
that we all were showing up somehow bumped and bruised from the constructs that we had grown up with.
Right.
And what he found was community
Mhm.
and connection
Mhm.
with people that he might have otherwise not even tried with,
Exactly.
and vice versa.
Exactly. I love that example. I love that story because I think that is a part of that showing up. It might take several times, and we acknowledge that and we even honor that. It might take several times, because I think it's important to note and check off that you tried,
Yeah.
you came, and that maybe it's the next time that you actually walk through the door or show up to the campgrounds or whatever it is.
It was a nice drive from Salt Lake City. So
Yeah, he had that. Uh, but I think, yeah, that's being able to deconstruct um, kind of the physical appearance and display and get to the inner core. And just based on this conversation that we've had in this episode, when people do make those comments like on Instagram or the podcast and saying, this is all wonderful, I love what you guys are talking about, but I don't think I could show up, I don't think I'd be accepted. Maybe our response is is something around, you know, not breaking through the physical wall and getting to, well, what do you think you could provide, or what would you want to share? What is it about you that um, that you could share or experience at this retreat or workshop or event? Getting to their blessings, getting to their gifts, their talents, their traits. What is it that you have
mm,
that you would want to share?
yeah. Yeah, I think Yeah, this is an interesting conversation.
Mm.
Because the other part of that title was working through shame and
Mm.
reclaiming our power.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes with the whole package.
Yeah.
When you're able to let go of that shame and break out of that mold, break out of those boxes, you are reclaiming. You begin that adventure of reclaiming who
Yeah.
you really are.
Fear is an interesting seductress.
Yes.
She's very efficient at pulling people in.
Mm-hmm. They've got it going.
And I think what we do with fear is we relinquish our power. We somehow feel that the justification of the fear is greater than the potential benefit of crossing that threshold. And so I think my encouragement about reclaiming that power
Mm-hmm.
is being willing to confront the fear
Mm-hmm.
and to not put my focus on the fear, but on the potential liberation and freedom that comes from crossing the threshold it presents.
Yeah.
And right, we fear rejection, we fear all these things, and by doing that, right, to radically accept ourselves. I mean, I think that's an example we could take from our trans community.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's such a profound, radical place of acknowledgement when I begin the place of hormone treatments and potentially surgery, right? I deliberately am shifting everyone's perception of me physically,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is a powerful place to be.
Yeah, it really is.
And we might want to look to our trans family to say,
Mm-hmm.
what can we learn through their example?
Yeah.
And coming to find our own space
Mm-hmm.
as queer men.
I love that.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Well, I'm glad we had nothing to talk about today.
Yeah, nothing at all.
Yeah. We are always curious, definitely deeply, profoundly curious in what you're thinking, especially topics that you'd like us to talk about. And, we take from our experiences, but we really value your feedback. So please go to the Instagram mindfully_gay, and you can direct message us or comment on one of our videos. We have a Facebook page called Mindfully Gay. You're welcome to join that and dialogue there. You can go to the mindfullygay.com website and communicate with us there. You can work with us telepathically.
If you happen to be watching this, because this is also on video, and it's on
YouTube.
On YouTube, you can certainly make comments there, and we will. I look at those comments and can easily respond to you there. There's ways to share your thoughts, share your feelings, your ideas about what you're needing. What do you need?
Yeah.
Maybe it could be around that. What do you need that we can just have a conversation about? And if you'd like to also be a part of that conversation, I mean, quite literally, we'd love to have you on as a guest, either in person or through Zoom, so that you can share what's on your mind. Because I'm sure there's other people out there who might be wondering or thinking the same kinds of things. We want to get this messaging out. I think what we're finding out, especially having conversations like this, is that we are radically breaking molds here and getting to the truth of a lot of things around who we are as gay individuals. And I think a lot of folks have similar thoughts and similar ideas about this, and want to be a part of that conversation. So we invite you.
Yeah. Our next retreat is in September.
Right.
We hope to have a few events between now and then, movie nights and sweat lodges and meditations.
Mm-hmm.
So please go to the website. But we hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories.
Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.